We're live.
All right, welcome back to the Responsible AI Summit. We are back for a panel discussion, and we will be chatting again with Magdalena and Honey. And both Joaquin and I will be in this panel as well. We have a lot to talk about. During the break, we had a chance to catch up, and we were discussing the benefits of living in warmer climates. And interestingly enough, that is actually one issue that often comes up in AI development and responsible AI is sustainability and the taxing in terms of energy use and earth resources that takes place from developing generative AI. Maybe something we can take up in this discussion, but we are going to start our panel with talking a little bit about privacy, ethical AI, and legislative frameworks. And I encourage you, I'll be asking some questions to drive the conversation forward if we get stuck, but I encourage you to jump in if you hear one speaker saying something that you want to comment on. Don't wait for me. We will be together for the next hour. And for the audience as well, I will be monitoring the comments. So don't be shy. Leave some questions for our panel. No question is too big or too small. We'll be happy to chat with you tonight. My first question goes to a warm-up for the entire panel. How can policymakers and AI developers collaborate to ensure that regulatory frameworks are practical, global, and do not stifle innovation? Who wants to go first?
So I'm happy to start. Thank you, Clara, for this fantastic question. And I think it is so important to point out this actually, because the question is not how. How, yes, but first of all, they have to work together and they have to collaborate, because otherwise, how do we get in all this knowledge and how do we make sure that the policies are actually up to date? So first of all, we need to understand the technical background. This is why it is really crucial to have the developers on board when it comes to developing those policies. On the other side, this is no wonder I'm saying that, but we need to involve HR people because they are the initial policy makers. But at the same time, as I also mentioned during my presentation before this morning, we need to have diverse voices. So also involving other people in those policies to make sure that we are covering as much as possible when it comes to those policies, right? So I think it is very, very important not to take anyone out of this and really to encourage people to raise their voice and to say, hey, there is something I was thinking about. None of us knows where this goes and what is going to happen with all of AI in the next months, couple of years. We have no idea. That's why we all need to work together on these policies. And what is also very important is that we shouldn't develop policies and say, this is now the policy that we have and we stick to it. Again, let's be open for auditing those policies from time to time. I think that's also another point that I would like to highlight. We need to be flexible on that. It's not like a housekeeping policy. How do I need to behave in the office? It's about AI, and AI is developing basically every single day. There is something new coming up. So we also need to make sure that we are flexible on the policies.
Yes, I think very important point, flexibility, because the tech is developing. We don't know the full scale. We know some things that are coming, but we don't know the full scale of impact. And we also, which is often the case with technology, we don't always know how it will be used by the generations that have this technology. So flexibility, ongoing auditing, really, really good points. Thank you for that. Honey, what are you thinking on this?
No, I totally agree with her that, that flexibility is very important in policy development. And what I also am, from my researching journey, what I have also realized is that there are two domains. So one is the technology, development, which is happening at very fast pace, right? So every day we see new models coming, every day we see something happening in technology part. But at the same point of time, if you, map that kind of development into policy making. So that is not happening that fast. And that is why the gap is, just transcending ahead. So that is where I think it is very imperative now that the policy makers need to work with technologists so that they also understand that, how the rapid development is happening. And, we can make the policy making adaptable with time, and also when they collaborate with technologists with diverse sectoral fields, then they also understand that what kinds of fluctuations and policy upgradation is required timely. So definitely I agree with this multidisciplinary approach which is required into policy making, and specifically when we are talking about a technology where we have a pretty rough idea that what the technology might have the implications, but still we are figuring out, and we are doing it at a very fast pace. So if you see the history of technology development, if you see the third industrial revolution, then you see the fourth industrial revolution, the time lapse which has been is becoming shorter and shorter. So definitely we are going to see these development much faster at pace, and I think that's where policy development also need to pace up the speed by which they are also getting, this collaboration with all this industry and technologists. So definitely agree with this point that it is imperative to have a collaborative network.
Yeah, and if I can just jump in on and piggyback on both of your notions here, how to collaborate to make innovation safe through both policy and engineering, industry work. I think that in some ways the knowledge can be reached to a certain degree where they have a common understanding, but the real life scenario is that they're not going to have the same level of expertise because one of them is applying it in field, the other one's trying to govern and regulate that, but they're both trying to figure things out as they work through these obfuscated, unknown areas. There is going to be a gap of learnings. Whatever you do, industry is always going to be at the forefront of learning what to do, what not to do, how to preserve their resources, and manage risk at a affordable level. But there needs to be that area of knowledge sharing, or events like these. I'm not trying to just promote my own stuff, but events like this and regular knowledge sharing that includes both industry and policymaking voices should help to kind of build that alignment a little better. I've heard through several discussions the idea of shifting left. So how do you incorporate privacy, responsibility, ethical characteristics in the design of events at the forefront of developing these innovations? That helps to stop some problems from happening before they reach production or reach real life people. Um, I myself consider myself to be an operational person. So if there are some operational guidelines, I think I've seen the UK government organize and distribute a lot of guidance and guidelines on how to incorporate user experience research and design and some other highly regulated areas that have reached a level of maturity. If we can take some lessons from other disciplines and bring that into the design of AI systems, I think that we can learn a whole lot because it's designing social technical systems. It impacts people. People need to adopt it. The technical elements are not so much understood, but it's the same kind of idea. So we need to just bring a lot of the lessons learned from other fields as well. And just keeping things light enough that we're not like, risk management, evaluating what could potentially blow up and be extremely harmful to people, regulating those a lot more tightly than the ones that have less consequence should not impede innovation at the rate that, you can't treat everything the same way. Everything has its own nuances and risk management profile. So just keeping that in mind.
I think very good points. And, I do a lot of work, of course, with education and with schools and consequently also with children. I have spoken to thousands and thousands of children about the way that they use technology. And it's almost always the case that the way the technology is designed and intended is not the way that the kids are using it. And I think we see that a lot, which means that it's very important that we bring into the conversation when we build frameworks enough of a feedback loop, so to speak, on the use, on the end user, and what's really taking place in the ecosystem of that technology in order to build the kind of governance that we have. And I think, as Joachim points out, it's not going to be the same for all tech. There are some risks that are there, but maybe are acceptable risks that we can manage. And then there are unacceptable risks, and we have to be very clear on what they are. The EU AI Act, of course, have identified some types of AI that meets their criteria for unacceptable risk. It has to be turned off February 1st because it is not allowed inside the European Union. And interestingly, much of that AI borderlines the kind of AI that's being used with students, including children. What comes to mind is something like AI that monitors eye movement during an exam proctoring software. And many students that take college level classes and use exam proctoring software have not turned 18 yet. And so the criteria for them using this type of software that's tracking their bio information is actually quite complex. And it may meet the standards for an unacceptable risk, whereas if the student is over 18, you could argue under certain parameters that it's high risk, but perhaps not unacceptable. So it's a complex environment. It requires that the stakeholders are properly informed, but that is infinitely difficult for several reasons, which makes me jump to the next question, because I want to talk a little bit about explainable AI. So we often talk about how explainable AI is crucial for ethical AI, but of course can create a tension with data privacy, and explainable AI might lead to more transparency as opposed to the black box AI, where the algorithms are so opaque, we really can't unpack whether it can ever be ethical. Yet it comes with a series of privacy challenges, particularly when we have vulnerable populations, persons with diminished capacity, children, and people who are digital illiterate, so to speak. So my question, I will start with Honey this time, but how can researchers and developers strike a balance between the need for transparency and confidentiality in the context of explainable AI?
Yeah, that's a great question, Clara. And to your previous points, I would like to add that one thing which I have realized with these ecosystem being more complex is that it is not possible to actually embed responsible AI practices once the model is into the production stage. So see, we have to understand that the more we have this ethical practices, ethical frameworks, or we talk about transparency, or we talk about explainability. So there is a concept where I follow Professor Stefano. He's a behavioral scientist from Wharton, and he suggested that decision-driven analytics are much more visible to implement in these whole AI ecosystem, because when you know what problem you are trying to solve, then you build policies and your responsible AI frameworks around them. You ensure the transparency, you ensure the explainability of some part of your ecosystem. You ensure that how much complex algorithm you need to build around. Is it necessary to actually approach more black box, algorithms, because even if we have sophisticated tools and methodologies in explainable AI, but it's impossible to actually, deal with these opaque algorithms, because you cannot actually merely reach that level of transparency with these algorithms. So it is left with the wiser decision in your first step only, when you treat this problem, and you have a decision to make that, okay, you want to automate a particular kind of ecosystem, and how much policies and frameworks you have intact for around responsible AI. So definitely explainability solves a lot of problems, but at the same point of time, it has to be at the initial phase of implementation, because after once we have the models, we have whole accuracies we are measuring, then it becomes really difficult for us to understand that, okay, what has been there and what we have done so far. So yeah, that's from my point of view. And yeah, I think we are getting a lot of research interest into this explainable AI part, and which is required as well, so that so many people tried working around these deep neural networks and black box problems, so that, as a research community, it's very important for us to keep on digging that how much flexibility and practices we can build around these systems.
I think very, very good points there, and especially this issue of back engineering existing advanced AI, which brings to bear this question about who's smarter, the people who continue with the models that can't be ever really become ethical, or companies that are building a foundation of ethics into the design from the startup. Magdalena, talk to us a little bit about your thoughts and your perspectives on the same question.
I mean, I fully agree with Honey, and I also think it's going to be very, very difficult to ever really say, okay, now we are out of this black box, or we fully understand how everything works and we can 100% explain. I'm not sure we will ever be able to reach this state, because AI itself is so complex, the algorithms are so complex, and as it's learning by itself and also developing by itself, it's kind of very hard to track that. So I think it comes down to us again as humans to take care of those who cannot take care of themselves. So as a mom, I can take the example of the children, or any other, group of people that is more disabled when it comes to the use of technology like AI. So then it is our responsibility as humans to take care of this type of use. And to stick to the children topic, I mean, when it comes to privacy, I can say I'm not concerned about my privacy, my data, I don't know. I mean, I have never killed anyone, so there is not much that could come out of my data or my life. I don't have any big secrets. So if you want to hack, I don't know, my bank account, you won't find too much. Go ahead. But jokes aside, I'm concerned about the privacy of my children. I'm concerned about their data, and I'm especially concerned because you cannot be 24/7 just next to them all the time, knowing exactly what they do. So I also want to give a heads up to all the other parents out there that might be, trying to figure out those things. I mean, my children are 3 and 2s, but if you have children that are a bit older and already using phones, you are doing a great job. You cannot be there 24/7. Of course, it is our responsibility, but that's the thing I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about how we're going to protect our children and, again, other people that might need this in terms of privacy, in terms of explainability. And even if we have this explainability, how are you going to explain to them? So if someone uses pictures from your children, I think we have all seen this video from Deutsche Telekom, if you remember, where they took this picture from Ella, I think they called her, and then, designed an avatar where she was older and then took her identity. Those are things that I'm concerned of. About my own privacy and my data, I'm not so concerned.
Yeah, I think I also have little ones, and of course also work with educational organizations. I used to feel like I was responsible for 70,000 children and raising them up. And now I feel like I have the whole world in my hands. Keeps me up at night, the actual risks that they are facing. And the deeper I dive into the tracking of the future trends, the more worried I am, actually. And I think it's important that we do bring that up, and also highlights how important it is that we really educate our parents and guardians to understand and get them in the conversation when it comes to policy making and frameworks. Joaquin, I know that you have a lot to say as well. What are your thoughts on this issue?
I'm trying to find the pieces and fit them together for my argument, but I think at the forefront of everything, as Diana mentioned in her presentation before, it is informed consent that is the basis of everything. I think there's a gluttony for a lot of organizations to collect more data than they need because they think it's the new oil or currency, something they can resell or use at a later point. And although that may be true in some aspects, the risk of holding, preserving, managing that information carries its own profile of risk and introduces these uncomfortable conversations. Sometimes you could collect information that anonymizes the people that you're engaging with or that you're serving, and you can assign these temporary identities that are just hashes of letters and numbers where you don't need to know the name or age or gender of the individual that you're engaging with. Then you're free to run these black box algorithms because then there's no major risk in exposing the information of an individual. But most people are in I don't want to say most people. Let me not generalize. I think conventionally, people are used to working and defining and creating systems that collect this information and then build from that. But there's still not that shift left, privacy at the forefront, collecting just the right amount of statistical data, user data at the forefront that prevents you from getting in trouble later on. I think, I've heard some presentations in the healthcare sector where there is the collection of first name, last name, blood type, social security, and all these things, insurance information that's required for billing, that's required for operating in the healthcare system today. But when it gets to transfer that information so that people can run machine learning and population data, then we have to scrub. Then we have to get rid of these PII, personal identifiable details that may leak out if it were to fall into the wrong hands. So we're never going to do away with black box. If anything, we're moving more towards black box. We can do what we can to employ explainable AI at junctures where there are rules that we can define and that map out what a administrator or a real life person can say if they were to make a decision on their own. But we can't entirely do away with that. We have to just make sure we plan ahead before we get into trouble, I think.
Yeah, very interesting, and I think it gives good insight to the complexities. I want to hop back a little bit on the same issue, and now go to Magdalena and then to Honey, because I have a question about leadership. Magdalena, earlier today you talked to us about HR and their particular role in successful AI integration. HR knows about policies and procedures, which is exactly what you need in order to get that established responsibly inside of an organization. And when it comes to organizations, we've seen a little bit of a difference in leadership. Some leaders have been early adopters, saying AI first, let's do this thing, training for everyone, we have expectations and we're hiring for AI skills, while others have taken a very hands-off or really opposition as well. And interestingly, we've seen some of the same things in ministries around the world. Some governments are very happy, let's go AI, and others seem to have not noticed that this is taking place yet. So the question for you to start with is about leadership as a founder, as a consultant. How do you advocate for ethical AI at the leadership level, especially in situations where these ethical practices might seem to slow down project timelines with all of the complexities that are embedded into ethical practices? And Honey, I'll have the same question for you, so you can jump in as soon as Magdalena has given us her thoughts on this.
So what I can say here is basically that I am positively surprised since I'm running my business and doing this consultancy and training on AI. I'm positively surprised that most of the leaders I came across to work with have proactively asked about ethical AI. So they would usually, even before we would go into the details of the training, ask me, are you also covering this part? And again, I was positively very surprised about this. And I think it's a fantastic sign for us as a community that we are moving already in the right direction. So I really think that in general, it is something that people are having on their mind and that they value and that they see as something very much important. I have to say that although in the most cases it has been like this, there are still some cases where it was exactly the opposite, but it was only a few. But exactly the opposite means that I was asked to not talk about ethical AI at all, which for me meant that I wouldn't do the training. I can, openly say that because it's not my values. It's not how I work and how I operate. So I would usually then turn that down and not work on that. There has been a case where I was not aware of this before and I have prepared everything. And then I was asked during the presentation to skip on the part. It happened once to me. So, but usually people are very much aware of the ethics, and it's very important to them, especially to leaders. Some of them are, asking the question and saying, well, but how can we, be innovative at the same time and on the other side be ethical if we don't know where it goes, what we have discussed in the very beginning? And usually what I say to them is, we don't know. But it's always good to do the right thing. And I really do believe in that. We just need to do the right thing and it will automatically lead to a better outcome. Again, we don't need to have all the answers before. We don't need to stand there and sit there, and no leader has to be sitting in front of the workforce or their team and saying, we are doing everything super ethical. No. The important point is that you are saying, guys, we are trying to, be as ethical as possible. These are our values. We want to make sure that we integrate this into our AI strategy, into our AI adoption. We have not figured out yet, and we don't know how it will look like. But along the way, we welcome you to give us your feedback, give us your inputs. Again, feedback loops involving employees and all the different stakeholders in the process, and then figuring it out along the journey. And I think this is the best way to actually do it. Because if there is someone saying, I have all the answers, it's not true.
No, I totally agree also. And see, my experience has been very mixed, I would say. So, for example, what I have experienced, engaging with approximately 60 organizations into my research journey, and I will just separate into a sectoral form. So many of the leadership truly have asked themselves that they will consider ethical, AIs, and even if they are approaching an AI ecosystem development, they will definitely ensure ethics and transparency at the forefront of these solutions. But what I've also understand that these leaders also value as an organizations rather serving their customers or their the front end users with high ethics. So for example, if a organization leadership and if an organization objectives and goals and visions and missions incorporate values and ethical transparencies and servicing their customer, then definitely they will put forefront these values whenever they are trying to integrate any kind of AI ecosystem into their organization. That is for sure. So for example, if I can match this, that when I was doing a project with mental health institution, which is a second biggest institution in India, they were very blunt about this, that we actually have this sensitive information of our patients, and at no cost they will compromise that confidentiality of their patients. And even if they are they are given with most efficient systems, but they have their pretty agenda set, that we have our patients, we have a lot of sensitive information about our patients when they they have their trust. We have we have a team which operates. So these kind of organization, and that was interesting to my insight as well, because I was not also expecting that these leaders and these organizations will give so much significance to ethics and to fairness, to unbiased systems, to actually making sure that, how the privacies of their customer data is keeping intact. So industry people are realizing that even if AI promises a lot of fruitful results, but at the same point of time, they're also concerned with all these things. So they have that fair idea, and that's a good part for us because that means that we are not actually just throwing something in the name of AI development. They understand that, what are the risks behind that as well. So that is same as my experience. And specifically, I have seen leaders and organizations who hold customer values very closely to them. They also give more value to, a responsible AI development part. And yeah, that's also my experience, which is a good sign for us as a community, because we see a lot of awareness which is building around this particular domain.
If I may add something, Clara, before we continue, because I think it's also very important to underline here that it depends on the culture of the organization. So even
Yes, yes.
far
Yeah.
before AI, what are your cultural
Yeah.
values? So as you said, honey, there are some organizations that are holding ethics very, very high. And if
Yeah.
they are doing so, they are doing it for all the years already.
Yes.
So
Yes.
for me, it's
Yes.
always a bit tricky when I see organizations starting the conversation about ethics now that we have AI. Then the question usually is, where have your ethics been before? So it
Yeah.
really comes down to the culture, and the
Yeah.
leadership team reflects usually the culture of the organization.
Yes.
So if the
Yeah.
person in the leadership role is there for, I don't know, X amount of years and has been working with these ethical values, then it's going to be a normal question for this person to
Yeah.
ask. But if not, then they would be like, oh, ethical AI? I was not even thinking about this,
Mhm. Yeah.
which is actually normal because people are, depends on the habits that we have, right?
Yeah.
We build those habits over years, usually, and we build these cultures over years. And this is what corporations also do.
Also, one thing, at the ending part, that so if we talk about the manufacturing sector, and when we say that, they want to deploy an automation system, so I see a lot of, discretion of thoughts when we talk about automation in manufacturing. They might be not so much bothered about how much ethical and how much transparency the system is developing. They are more concerned about the accuracy, the performance of the systems, because the data which the system is interacting is also very important. So if it is the forefront customer data or the patient data, or the system is building on which data set, that is also one thing which creates a lot of difference when we talk about responsible AI. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very good points. And it was funny, Magdalena, when you bring up the culture, because that's exactly where I was heading. And actually, also for Jurkin, I was very curious because you're in this unique position that not only are you in many of these global conversations in the swarm community, but you're also in the United States, where we have really a division between profit-driven pressures and then ethics, non-desirability in terms of ethics, because there seems to be this understanding that ethics and profit are in opposition, or innovation and ethics are in opposition, and therefore profits. But we're also seeing a movement from some organizations really asking for more focus on ethics and who are themselves taking ethical initiatives, some with more or less success, but nonetheless. Could you give us some thoughts on what you are seeing, not just from your part of the world, but also from these global conversations that we're having when it comes to this developing a culture of ethics or not, and how that impacts the end result?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, and that has a lot of different variables to take a stab at. But yeah, I think that generally, the US in itself has 50 states, and even within that, there's a ton of like subcultures and specific cities that have their own temperature, different attitudes. So it's very difficult to generalize the United States as a whole. But I can say that there is an openness to say, here's the objective, go do it. And you may run into some mistakes, but they're tolerable risk. It's the risk or the cost of doing business. I think depending on the organizational type, there's just this openness to failure in the American culture. And I think that's a steady piece of insight across most people that you engage with in this environment. Now, I think there are some stereotypical traits as well in different regions. Like Scandinavian people are more pragmatic, leaner with their production, leaner with even their software. They do a lot of things from scratch. I see that there's a budding development of uh, Silicon Valley opening up in India. Bengaluru is gaining a lot of traction, gaining a lot of foreign investments. But what I can talk to and what I would like to focus my response from is being a project manager. So I think, organizations prioritize based on risk management, as we spoke about. There's different levels of volatility depending on where you're going. If you are doing something in a mental health environment where people can potentially kill themselves if they see that some data was leaked about their personal information, damn, like you have to approach that with the bomb squad. That you need to have several layers of risk management in place before you even engage. And then there's other environments, as Honey was saying, like in manufacturing. Is the barcode read correctly? Is this being shipped to the right place? Is this going to be more efficient? Are we going to save some hours in our production? So the rate of change of adopting these technologies is measured in proportion to the risk management and the maturity of the organization. If they can start off with some experiments that are non-consequential, that don't process sensitive data, they should be able to start experimenting, gaining some competencies in these new technologies. And the point in the beginning, as any kind of startup environment, is to maximize your learnings. So that's what I see as coming from the mature organizations. The immature organizations, doesn't matter where you go, they're just adopting things and breaking things and falling prey to these problems, like the lawyer that had legal issues because he was using ChatGPT to create arguments, and it was citing fake or non-existent citations, cases, laws. That makes sense. You shouldn't be doing that. There was a case with an auto dealership that they implemented a chatbot that had no guardrails or logical limits. So a guy got a free Ford 150. So that's like a $30,000 plus car for free. There were some people that they've noted this example of the airlines that they also implemented a chatbot without guardrails. People got free flights. So in that consequence, it's silly, it's funny, but in the consequence where someone can be incarcerated, someone can die, it's not so lighthearted. So just need to make sure that people are taking measurable risks and increments as they learn and adjust and fortify their procedures accordingly.
Yeah, I think really interesting real life cases there. We've unfortunately seen some real bad results of technology that has caused a great deal of harm. So let's try a rapid fire question. I'll send it around to all three of you. We'll start with Magdalena, then Honey, then Joachim. I'm a C-level executive. Why should I care about ethical AI? What would be your elevator pitch?
If you don't care about ethical AI, you probably don't care about your people. And if you don't care about your people, then at a certain point, you will stand there alone with your C-suite title, but then your company won't be able to run. So I would think twice. This is something that I would say.
Honey, what do you think?
You are mute, Honey.
So I would actually go with the same kind of a response, but yeah, if you don't care about ethics, then you don't care about your customers or committee. So if in that scenario you bring forward this kind of solution, then in the long term, I don't think that is going to be a fruitful decision for you. So yeah, that is something that you need to think twice, because ethic is not something which is a choice. I think that is something which is the responsibility that we are having to actually do something. Every business have a customer or have a user that they have to serve into. So it's more of a kind of a responsibility rather we are thinking as a choice. So yeah.
Pragmatically, it's 20 times cheaper to catch a mistake before it reaches production, 20
Yeah.
times cheaper customer
Yeah.
wise, legal wise, culturally wise, to just set the right frame before you propagate this from one business unit to multiple. Even if you're working in a small enterprise, you don't want to introduce unnecessary risk or bad practices. It's bad for your brand, bad for your operations, bad for everything.
Really good answers. So definitely something to take to the thinking bank for our C-level executives around the world. Speaking of cost and profit, and I want to go backwards here. So we start with Joachim and then Hani and then to Magdalena. One of the things that I hear a lot in my work from schools is okay, it sounds like a good idea that we should do AI governance. And if you're in the EU, you don't have a choice. You have to establish AI governance. What does it cost? And my answer is, well, it does cost money. It costs money to establish. You need a compliance officer. You need a system for risk management. You need a system for auditing. You need consulting services. You need training. It is not free. But what's the cost outside of fines? It's bad reputation. It's fixing mistakes, which is very expensive. And worst of all, it is the risk of harm, real harm that can come to the most vulnerable human beings on the planet. And yet the question remains. I will start with Joachim and work my way backwards. For smaller organizations with very small budgets, how can they work towards prioritizing privacy and prioritizing ethics? What are some of the tangible steps that they can take if their budgets simply prohibit them from making big movements in their processes?
Unfortunately, this is very much a whiplash effect. Everybody says, yeah, we have until X date and it'll be fine. It's a week or a couple hours of reading. Well, how hard can it be? It's like doing your taxes. You have to do it. You have to do it because there are repercussions to it. You have to report to governing bodies. You are responsible for lives, for people. Restaurants are responsible to feed people things that won't kill you or put you in bed or in the hospital. So this is no different. What I would say, sorry, can you say the question one more time?
Yes. So for a lot of smaller organizations,
Right.
they may feel that the budget simply prohibits them
Yeah.
from engaging in this in a meaningful way.
It's difficult. They have to manage short cash flow. Some are unprofitable. Some are just like breaking even. The matter of fact is they have to do just enough to survive the bare minimum requirements until they can reach a level of maturity or until the commercial market offers affordable tooling. There's affordable tooling for people to do their bookkeeping. But how long did that take? We had to rely on other people and service providers in the intermediary point. But don't skimp out. If you can't, get some advice. And when things get cheap, then you can affordably comply.
Yeah, a kind of my favorite question here, because it has been so long that I've been studying small firms, and it is true that it is very tough for them to survive, and they are very resource constrained, and they do work on short, time and short resources, and practically and more, tangible measures that they can leverage is that most of these organizations, they do have privacy and security and these methods to incorporate. I understand that AI is a costly technology, but at the same point of time, it is also about how much they want to understand that how they can incorporate it. So, for example, if they are using cloud, to incorporate, there are certain setups that are provided even in the cloud infrastructures that they can leverage for security and privacy protocols. But the point is that how much they're aware of it, that, how they can leverage a cloud infrastructure to actually build that secure and privacy protocols. So one thing that once they see, definitely AI is going to evolve, and it is going to be cost effective for these organizations. But more pragmatically, what they can do is that they can leverage a lot of awareness and training around these methods first, that how they can incorporate these things into their business process automation. And on the other hand, anything that if they are building that capacity into themselves, that incorporating such solutions, one thing they can also leverage is that most of the time, if they are using cloud infrastructure or any third-party service providers, how forefront they can put these things, how forefront they can ask them that, we want a compliant regulations regarding this or this service, we want this measure to be taken care of. So it is that willingness to, to learn, to invest, and to make your priority. Because anyways, if you're going to, deploy any kind of AI solution, you are going to invest money into that, or you are going to outsource, or you can find funds and all those for small firms. But if that is your priority, and if you're keeping intact parallelly, so then definitely it is possible. But in what way you can do it, that depends on your prioritizing that effort.
I absolutely love what you two said. Joaquin, you said you were talking about the service providers that we used to have in the past, and now that changed. And you were now mentioning the willingness, honey. I think this is one of the main drivers. But I would do it quite easy, actually. So I would take the question that Clara asked specifically to your business. If you are a small business, take it as a prompt and ask ChatGPT or Claude or any other large language model, and tell them exactly what your budget might be for this and ask for solutions. Knowledge was never easier to access than it is today, first of all. And second of all, there are so many new tools coming out. Also, what we have discussed earlier, there are so many providers offering free trials, for example. So go ahead and use those free trials if you don't have the budget at the moment. The willingness is what counts. And then when you get basically the outcome that you would like to have, you can always, but always talk to those people, with those providers. You can say, okay, I have a limited budget. What can we do there? Because it's also, the pricing should be different if you are a huge enterprise with 10,000 plus, or if you are a small business with 100 employees, for example. So I believe that it was never easier to get like a tailored plan to exactly what you need than it is today.
Yeah, a very interesting point as well. Throw it back to those companies and say, what are your options, and leverage AI to help you think that through. Very, very interesting. I want to shift our conversation a little bit. We've talked about privacy. We've talked about ethics. And we've talked about the governance of AI. I want to switch our conversation a little bit into rights. I have worked recently on writing up a proposal to the UN for an update on our universal human rights. I think we have cause maybe to consider whether we need to add some new articles because those were written more than 70 years ago, at the time when we didn't have AI and technology didn't really have an impact in our lives. Well, technology had an impact in our lives, certainly during a Second World War, but advanced technologies, digital technologies, compute technology, the way it's reaching into human lives today. So I want to start with you, Honey, based on both your research and the experiences that you have, perhaps even with the aspects that you have from your region. You are in India, so you represent our global South. I wonder, for you, in the digital age, privacy, for example, is often treated as a kind of commodity. So we've kind of bracketed it out rather than a fundamental right. But according to the universal human rights, it is a right. We have a right to privacy. Do you see this shift as inevitable? Or is there a way for us to reframe privacy as a sort of non-negotiable aspect of human dignity in an era of generative AI? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I love this question. And, recently, I have been studying around that how the PII, how vague it is that, the definition of PII is what actually is PII. It's not just about my phone number, my photographs, my timeline, which I shared. It's a lot more complex than we think about. Now we are facing systems that can predict my location, that can predict my choices, that can predict even what I want in down the line of 2 years, and we are competing with those kind of capabilities. And now for that question, I recently did a dip test, and I actually, floated a questionnaire in colleges, which is in India only. And I wanted to understand that how many of these students, and these were, first year graduate students, and they were around the age of 20 across, 21, 23. And I asked them that what is PII, how much they are aware of privacy, and why, what do they understand when we talk about PII. And interestingly, they have no idea about it. So till now, the results that I'm getting from those, and these are the digital experts and the digital generation that we are talking about, that they are so much into their mobile phones, they're on every social media accounts. But the problem here is that one, that I think someone was mentioning in this panel discussion only, that what is the consent, what is the importance of consent, then when we talk about how my information is going to be used. But there is also an issue that how transparent the organization is communicating that consent. So for example, there is a plausible deniability which exists. So for example, I see a pop-up coming and we say that, okay, do you agree with this cookie, or do you agree to be your data to be used? And there are 3 to 4 points, and there is a paragraph or 500 words, which is complex to understand that how to actually interpret it. And now you are actually putting these kind of information in front of users, those who really don't understand their privacy and their right to be, their data. And so this is a very two front war that we are actually entering into, we have entered into. So recently I was going with the concept known as sharenting, so where people who are putting their lives online on YouTube, and how their small kids also have a right to have a right to be privacy, right? So they don't need their photographs from their childhood to be posted online. They know they don't need the information to be there. So I think it has to be taken care both ends. So we need to aware the generation that the kind of privacy breaches that could happen. What are their rights of privacy? So recently we saw that Australia has put a regulation that below 16 they are not going to allow social media to be used by children. So that is something regulation, and that is one way where policymakers come into the picture. So there has to be a two-way approach where you make community aware about their right of digital privacy and their data. First, they understand that what is their digital data, and the second part comes up with the overall aspect on the regulation part, on the policy making part, that how much integrated these two can go. Because so we were talking acceptable risk, then we were talking about non-acceptable risk, and now we are also seeing a non-aware risk. So we do not know that when we are floating all this data of our kids, when we are floating all this data about ourselves, these public accounts, pictures, how they can be leveraged, we don't have any idea right now. So that is one thing that I think, which is a prompt requirement from all these authorities that they are taking care of on digital governance, that has to come into the picture. And that has to be done on global level, I feel, because once it is done at the global level, then definitely it's going to be top to down approach. So yeah.
Amazing. Magdalena, I wonder if you could pick up on that and maybe also add some thoughts about the rights around rights to not be discriminated against in hiring processes, for instance, based on being a marginalized group, sexuality, gender, origin, and so on, and in the same context of privacy, because we know now that many hiring managers will go online and look for that person person and their social media, which of course brings another layer of risk to that person. They are less anonymous the first time the hiring manager really takes a look at their CV and looks into them. So based on what Hani was saying there, and maybe bouncing off on that a little bit, if you could give us your thoughts.
It's difficult, Clara. It's very difficult, because if you are exposing yourself online, then somehow you need to be aware of the risk. And again, I'm speaking, about us as people that know what they are doing. I'm not talking about children and, other groups that are not aware about this digital age, but I'm talking about us, basically, who knows that if you post a certain picture of yourself online, that this might have a consequence. So if you are exposing yourself online, and let's say you have all your profiles open, because you have also the option to have the profile in private, and if then a hiring manager sees your partying pictures, I don't know what, and yay, and decides, well, this doesn't fit our, well, it could also be that it perfectly fits the company culture. It also exists. But in this case, I would say the right is on the company side. Because you as an individual, that you have posted this picture open to public. The other thing is, and then it gets even more difficult, someone else has posted this picture of you and you were not consent with this. So where does this go? I mean, you see, it goes way too far away. So yes, what can you do? You can ask the person to take away the picture, and I don't believe that the person will say no or whatever. I mean, those things can also happen. We also know there's a lot about cyber mobbing, but I think it goes way too far. But if like two adults are talking to each other and you say, okay, please take away this picture, I think it shouldn't be a problem. So now the chance that exactly in this window between the party and the next morning you have applied to a job and the hiring manager has seen it, I think it's a little bit unlikely, this event to happen. But again, it's your own responsibility. I really think that. And you need to be perfectly aware of how you present yourself online, how you want to be perceived, and what you are putting out there. So we are talking about building a personal brand. And I really believe that this is important. It's important to build a personal brand. And it's good to be authentic, which is also very important. But obviously, there are some sides that you don't need to show in public. You don't need to present yourself playing with your children or partying with your friends or being at a family dinner. You can present your professional side. And this is perfectly fine. And if you're aware of that, you need to be aware that the company might look into those pictures. I know in the US, it's you have a lot of lawsuits, I think, going on, and it's very easy to sue people. In Europe, we don't have this at all, so it's much unlikely that you can based on some type of online presence, you can sue someone, or usually the judge will say, okay, I really don't care about your personal pictures. I know it's different in the US, but I can only speak from my point of view. But again, I think it's your personal and your own responsibility. And if we want to have rights based on this, then again, we need to point the finger at ourselves and think about, how am I actually using this online world and this digital world? So now Hani was also talking about something completely different, which is that we need to consent for certain applications to use them. For example, if I download an app and it asks me to give all the rights, if I say no, usually I cannot download it. I don't know if you have experienced that, and it's also funny because we are speaking so much now about this topic, but it exists already 15 years ago. When did Facebook arrive? I don't know, 2009 or something. And since then, they are collecting all of our data and offering us exactly to see based on our preferences. So they are doing it already for years, and we have never complained about it. So again, pointing the finger at ourselves and really thinking about, how am I going to use this digital, things around me, how I'm going to present myself online, and really be really careful with this usage as well.
Amazing. Controversial, I think. This is definitely a good one for debate. Joachim, we only have a couple of minutes left, but I'm dying to hear what's on your mind.
I'll talk very quickly. I agree that we need to update the human rights to incorporate, as Magdalena and Honey have stated, social media components, components of informed consent. I think right now all companies have kind of just said, do you agree or disagree? But does that even do anything? You can't know for sure. They could collect your information and just give you the face, and nobody can go and audit their systems to the degree. Nobody has the level of enforceability where they can check for sure if you're saying you're doing what you're doing, or say what if your intentions match what you say you're going to do. There's no way to verify that 100%. If we say we are, or we say we're going to hit somebody with a ruler for not complying, that's very unrealistic at this point in time. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't strive to champion media, internet, social media, AI, economical literacy. Those are very core elements operating in this global economy. So I'll stop there, and I'll give it back to you, Clara, so we can wrap it up.
Thank you so much. I love this panel. I'm so glad we're recording everything, because I'm going to go back and re-listen to some of this, because there were really some profound ideas in here that I know I want to continue working with. Ever so much. Thank you, Magdalena from Switzerland, just flew in from New York. Honey joining us from India, Joaquin from the United States, and I'm here in Spain. We were able to have a fantastic global conversation on everything that ranges from AI ethics, privacy in generative AI, black boxes, explainable AI, and rights, including human rights in the digital era. Thank you to all of our audience from around the world for listening in. We'll take a short break, and we will be back later with more presentations and conversations in responsible AI.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Clara.